Welcome to Detroit Auto Accident Law with Ravid and Associates.
Hello and welcome to Detroit Auto Accident Law with the trial lawyers of Ravid and Associates. Ravid and Associates is a Michigan-based personal injury firm that's fought for more than 10,000 accident victims statewide. My guest today is Kristian Kajdic, an associate attorney at Ravid and Associates who focuses on civil litigation, no fault, and auto negligence cases. My name is Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about what to do and what not to do after a car crash in Detroit. Kristian, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into today's topic, I'm curious about your background. How did you get started in personal injury law, and what drew you to representing crash victims in Detroit?
Yeah, Kevin. So I originally I wanted to be a lawyer since high school. It's nothing. I guess since high school I wanted to be a lawyer, and the biggest thing is I never knew that I was going to jump into personal injury. But during law school, you have to do some clerking usually, to get some experience before you actually get licensed and then become an attorney. So I happened to be clerking at a personal injury law firm during my first and second year of law school. And during that time, I began to see the issues that was occurring with individuals that were injured in personal injury. The biggest concern that I saw and that was happening and that this law firm was defending at that time was that these injured people were being taken advantage of. They weren't given all their rights, and the insurance company did what it needed to do in order to put themselves in a better position with every claim what the injured person had made.
Mm-hmm. So it just kind of rubbed you the wrong way, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna fight for these people.
Well, yeah, it wasn't the initial goal at first at the beginning of law school, but once I started doing it, I really got interested in the personal injury aspect. And honestly, it just drew me towards just the injured people and seeing how powerful some of these insurance companies were and how much of an advantage they had without against these injured parties, unless the injured party actually had an attorney representing them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right. So take me through the very first steps you want someone to take at the scene or right after an accident happens.
Yeah, Kevin, the first important thing is that sometimes people forget is that check yourself. See that you're doing okay at the scene after a collision before you do anything. So I tell all, people should just make sure that they're, not bleeding. Everything's fine with them before they take the next steps. And once they actually find, everything's fine with them, the next step is really, to call the police to the scene of the accident.
What about documentation? What kind of things do you want people to make sure they get, if possible, of course?
So with regard to documentation, I guess the biggest thing is obviously if there's a police report, you should have the police report. Next, the police report helping you show that the collision occurred. The police report also contains other important information such as the other driver's information, their insurance information, how the accident occurred. It will help the insurance company see how the collision occurred on that day. The other big thing that documentation is the biggest important is people need to bring their policies, their insurance policies, in order that we can see what they have coverage for, which they bought, with the contract with the insurance company. And then the final big thing that we always need is at the end of the day, the insurance company does not care about, our client's subjective complaints. All they care about is the objective records, and specifically through medical records, to show what injuries an individual has that can be documented by a professional, whether it's a doctor, a PA, a physical assistant, or a therapist, or a psychiatrist. The big thing is the medical records, because the insurance companies look at the objective records rather than people's subjective complaints.
Okay. And then when it comes to photos, how impactful are photos of the scene?
So the photos at the scene, this is again going back to your original question, is after you obviously check that you're okay, call the police to the scene. I always advise my clients also, if you're healthy enough, get out there and get some pictures of the scene, because the impact does make a difference when it comes to the insurance companies evaluating cases or looking at cases. And the bigger thing is, especially if your case ever goes in front of a trial, the best thing that you could show a jury that the jury will understand is seeing the damage to the vehicle at the scene of the collision.
Should people call their insurance company right away and tell them what happened?
So that's a twofold question there. The important thing is, depending on what your contract says inside the insurance that you have, sometimes some of the insurance companies will have these policies where you have to report it within 24 or 48 hours of an accident. The double-edged sword there is obviously you have to comply with your insurance policy, but the worry is sometimes when you set up your claims, when you're making an initial phone call conversation with the insurance companies are sneaky. They will try going beyond the initial questions that they need to ask to set this claim up. And then they will start poking at other stuff such as pre-existing injuries, any past auto accidents. And the trick is that they're trying to see if you'll lie to them, because obviously the insurance companies at some point will be able to pick up whether you've been involved in prior car accidents, if you had prior slip and falls or other types of accidents. And of course, they will able to get your medical records, and especially records from your primary doctor, who some people have been seeing for over 10 or 15 years.
In your experience, are there any common mistakes that drivers make in those first 24 hours that end up hurting their claim later?
Yeah, I think the first big one is, and again, it is not required, but police reports are pretty important in cases. Like I stated earlier, I think the biggest thing is it helps you get the information of all the drivers and to see how the police recorded the accident occurring. Even though police reports and during litigation are not admissible evidence at all, they can be helpful at the early processes to set up the claim and get your initial payments started before anything happens with regard to an insurance company potentially denying your claim. The other big one is, at the scene, sometimes you will not feel pain at all. As soon as a collision occurs, sometimes people, adrenaline is just rushing and they do not feel pain at all. They feel pain when they go home or the next day or 2 days after the collision. And the big thing is to always get yourself checked, not just for the insurance purposes, but obviously to make sure that your health is good. Even though you may feel like you're fine and everything's doing okay, I still highly recommend that an individual at least go to urgent care or even emergency room, or even if they could get their visit with the primary doctor in that day or the next day, just to get checked up, just to make sure everything's okay with them with their health.
You mentioned the police report a couple of times. In Michigan, do the police pretty much always show up to the scene of an accident, or if it's not wildly serious, do they not always show up?
I guess it would depend on the area that you're in sometimes. The big thing is usually police will show up to the scene. I've had maybe a few cases where the police did not show up to the scene, or the police were taking over an hour or two to come to the scene. And then obviously both individuals got fed up and they, exchanged information and left. And if that happens, the biggest thing is I always, again, same thing, tell the clients, make sure you get the other person's information. You have to remember that if the police do not come to the scene and you do not get their information or even their license, and they leave the scene because of mutual agreement, then if you plan on bringing that lawsuit, it's pretty hard to do because you have no information on the other driver.
Yeah. Do you recommend people, if the police don't show, that they go and file a police report at a police station, or is that kind of just a moot point at that time?
So I've had one or two cases where people agreed to meet at the police station after the collision, and the other person did not show up to the scene.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, the biggest thing is get the information at the scene. If you're able to take a picture of their driver's license or take a picture of their insurance information or their, license plate, that is very important to get, because if we are able to at least get the license plate, we can do a background check in order to figure out who the vehicle owner is of that vehicle in case they do flee the scene or they mutually, do not show up to the police station like that was agreed upon between you guys.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So Michigan's a no fault state, which confuses a lot of people. Can you explain what no fault really means after an accident and how it affects who pays what?
Yeah. So Michigan no fault, whether you're at fault for a collision or not at fault at a collision, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you have auto insurance or you live with somebody who has auto insurance, or sometimes even in some scenarios, you can get insurance assigned through the state, which is the MACP. But at the end of the day, whether you're at fault for the collision or not, it really doesn't matter. You're entitled to certain benefits if you're in an auto accident, and these benefits include something called allowable expenses. So allowable expenses just really includes medical bills. If you get some personal care, some mileage, is all covered under that aspect of it. The second aspect that you're able to get is wage loss. So if you miss time off of work, you're entitled to wage loss from the insurance company. And then the final one is something we call replacement services. Um, it's also called household chores. So let's say if somebody's injured and somebody is not able to do some of the basic chores around the house, such as cleaning, cooking, taking out the trash, making the bed, you're able to get an individual to help you with these chores, and the insurance company is responsible for paying for that too.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. That's a bit more extensive than other states.
Yeah, yes, Michigan does have a great, no fault state with regards compared to the other states that have way less to provide after an auto accident.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I feel like a lot of people probably think, well, if the police report looks clear and this is an easy a case, if you will, that the insurance company will treat them fairly. Is that generally true or not always the case?
It's really not the case. The police report, like I said earlier, is not admissible evidence. So the best it does is help us gather some information that we will need, and it's much easier to get from the police report than any other source. At the end of the day, the police report helps the insurance company see that a motor vehicle collision occurred, which is one aspect that you need. But however, even if you have the police report, even if you're whether you're at fault or not at fault for the collision, you got to remember the insurance companies will still try to attack other parts of your case. And the biggest part they usually try to attack is whether you're lying to them, whether that includes you not disclosing previous auto accidents or other slip and falls, trip and falls that you've been in, where you might have injured the same body parts that you injured in this auto accident that you're making a claim for, or pre-existing. Sometimes the insurance company will ask you such a generalized question, such as, "Have you ever had back pain?" And it's such an open-ended question,
Who hasn't, right? I mean, who hasn't?
and that's exactly the point. But the way the insurance companies sometimes look at this is if you say no, and then they look at your, let's say your primary records, and 5 years ago, Kevin complained about a little back pain, just randomly, and they see the back pain, they will try connecting the dots and saying that, Kevin had pre-existing back pain and it's not because of this collision. So it's always important just to be careful when you're speaking with the insurance company.
Yeah, definitely. That's funny. Have you ever had back pain? It's like, have you ever stubbed your toe? It's like, yeah, we all have.
And it's crazy. There's just such generalized questions, and who knows when is the last time somebody's complained about back pain or even a neck pain or something that's not that major. And again, like I said, insurance companies will use whatever they need to get whatever favors them in the end.
So, can you walk us through what happens when someone hires Ravid and Associates? What does your team actually take off their plate in those first few weeks?
Yeah, Kevin. The big thing here is once somebody is involved in whether it's a motor vehicle collision or any type of accident, there's a lot going on in their life. They have to worry about the actual entire process with the insurance company. They have to worry about taking care of themselves with regard to their health, and then other aspects such as people are worried. Some people do not work, and financial burdens because they're not maybe getting their wage loss claim from the insurance company. The big thing at Ravid and Associates is that once you come into the law firm, we take those parts with regard to the legal aspect, the dealing with the insurance companies, making sure the wage loss portions are paid. Um, we take that off your plate. So the biggest thing I always tell all my clients is take care of yourself health wise and let me and the law firm worry about everything else that's going on with regard to the insurance process, the wage loss, try and get everything paid, making sure your medical bills are covered. And I think that helps people often because that takes a lot off their plate now, and they could just focus on the actual recovery after in a collision.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to. You're managing your health. You're managing like the mental aspect of things that can be heavy as well, and then you're also trying to sit there and do paperwork and talk to insurance companies and do all this stuff. That's a lot for anyone to manage.
And so, sometimes the mental aspect is more than the physical. There's a lot going on, and if there's any way that our firm or me I could help relieve some of that stress while you focus on your health, that's what we do.
You've handled a lot of no fault and negligence cases. What do you really hope every injured person in Michigan understands, perhaps after hearing our conversation today?
I think the biggest thing is it's unfortunate to say this sometimes that insurance companies are not on your side, unfortunately. Whether you are making your premiums every 6 months or every year, however you have set up to get this auto insurance for the vehicles, so you have these no fault benefits, the insurance company really will do what it takes to save a penny or a dollar or whatever you want on their end. And it's an unfortunate process sometimes. And the biggest thing I recommend is whether you hire an attorney, at least also get that a free consultation. Our law firm offers that. At least speak to an attorney if there's something that you're concerned, even if you don't have any intention of hiring an attorney. And that way you can at least get some background help or any assistance to get a potential step forward ahead of the insurance company in just the games that are played by them.
All right, well, that's it for today's episode of Detroit Auto Accident Law with Ravid and Associates. To learn more or schedule your free consultation, visit ravidandassociates.com. You pay no legal fees unless they recover for you. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone that you think could use the information. We'd very much appreciate it. Kristian, really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.